Everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing another layout in my 2019 album. This is a 9x12 layout of my boyfriend's dog Shadow, and he's just a cute little puppy who's sleeping in this photo. It's nothing too crazy. So what I'm doing is cutting down my cardstock, my white cardstock to 9x12, and then I'm also cutting off some strips of cardstock down to about an inch and about 2 inches. And the only idea that I had for this layout is that I wanted to do some paper strips down the side, and I also wanted to do something a little bit fancy with some mesh and some hot glue. So that's the plan for today. Let's get started. The papers that I used, I believe the two that I just had this single sheets were from I think it's Fancy Pants. They're from my Craft Online haul, so if you're really curious, you can go have a look at that haul. And then this is just the Maggie Holmes Shine paper pad, and I'm just using the green one. And I wasn't sure why I decided to go with sort of like a greeny navy color palette. There's no real color in this photo that stands out a lot, so I just kind of thought I'm just gonna do whatever I wanted, so I did. I'm going to adhere these down onto the page using some double-sided tape, and I'm just lining them up to make sure that I have it in the order that I wanted. I wanted that navy one with the flowers to be the one on the top. That was really all I knew. I just sort of picked cards that coordinated with that one. I think when you're doing paper layers like this, you should use some cardstocks that either are from the same collection so they coordinate, or they have very similar colors, because otherwise it can clash a little too much. So I'm just sticking down with some double-sided tape. This double-sided tape is from Kmart from my memory. It's really good. I normally just buy a whole bunch of it in bulk. They come in like packs of 2 for like $3, so I normally just go in there and buy 10 packets, and then they last me for a few months. So I'm just sticking it down like I said, and I knew when I started this that the photo of the dog, obviously Shadow, he is black, so I thought it'd be cool to sort of bring out my black mesh that I have never used on a layer. I've used it once, and it was when I bought it about 2 years ago, so I thought it'd be time to use it again. I'm just trimming the photo down so it's a little bit smaller, because I like to have different sized photos throughout my album, and I think the one this was actually going next to was also a horizontal 6x4, so I thought it'd be a good idea to trim it down so it's a slightly different composition of photo. That's just what I like to do. And because of the fact that I'm using pattern paper in the background, and then I'm going to do the really fancy thing with the mesh later on, I only wanted a really small paper layer for the photo, so I decided to use some vellum. If you don't have vellum, you could probably just use some white tissue paper, or even just any plain cardstock. It would work if you wanted to replicate this layout. It would totally work. You just need something that is not going to draw too much attention to itself. If you like layouts and you don't mind mixing together, really bright, vibrant cardstocks and colors and papers, then go for it. But if you're like me and you like to have it sort of a little bit more toned down, I'd go with the vellum or some tissue paper, or even some plain cardstock. So I also decided to grab out this gold, what would you call this? It's something you wrap presents up with. I can't remember what it's for. I actually bought it as a art activity for a lesson I taught, and we actually used far less than I thought. So being the crafty person that I am, I brought it home and have been using it for scrapbooking ever since. It gives a really nice detail to the photo and really draws your attention, particularly in a layout like this for me, which I think kind of draws away from the photo, so the gold just kind of brings your attention back to it. And again, it's one single color, one block color, so it's not drawing away too much away from that pattern paper background, and also the mesh that is going to come up. So what I'm doing with the mesh, you're probably wondering that the whole time. You can see it in the thumbnail, but that doesn't matter. So here is the mesh. I got this off of eBay a few years ago. I think it was like $1 for a few meters, something like that. And I'm going to cut this in half again. This is about 6 inches wide, and I cut it to about 3 inches because I thought the 6 inches was a little too big, and I only want it on the bottom half of the photo. I don't want it on the top half. what I'm going to do is sort of do like a accordion fold with the mesh to create an extra textured element and also a photo mat. So I'm just sort of figuring out where I want the photo to go first, because once you stick this stuff down with hot glue, it's not going to come back off. So make sure you're happy with where you position your photo. It can be anywhere on the page, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you like where it is before you do it. So there's my hot glue gun. I'll show you quickly what I did. So basically I put some hot glue down and then I just use the edge of my scissors just to stick it down so I don't burn my fingers. This did take me about 15 minutes and here is the gorgeous result. I know you can see that hot glue down the center, but don't worry about that because I'm going to use the photo to cover that up. What I'm also going to do is cut a little section out of the middle, so I'm taking out a little bit of the extra bulk because this is slightly bulky. It's a very 3D embellishment. That does tone it down. And I'm just using my scissors just to make it, exactly how I want it. You can always change it if you didn't like exactly how it's stuck down, just to make it straight. This will not come off from what I've seen. I've used this on a layout, like I said, about 3 years ago, and it's never come off. So I don't think it's going to come off anytime soon. Hot glue does tend to stick, and I know it's not acid-free, but I do remember reading somewhere that you can get acid-free hot glue. You could also use any really, really thick glue for this. I would suggest hot glue if you don't mind using it. It does work a lot quicker, and you don't have to hold it until the wet glue dries because it sets pretty instantaneously, hot glue. And I'm just using also a little bit of foam tape on the part that the photo is not on top of the mesh because, as I said, it's very bulky, so you want it to have that little extra element so that the photo is not dipped. Once I do that, I do stick a little bit of extra double-sided tape on there because my foam tape is losing its stick. It's just a little bit of extra insurance, I like to call it, something I always do. I like to add a lot of glue, and I'm also going to add some wet glue on top of it. The wet glue is obviously because I'm sticking it down onto mesh. If you wanted to be extra secure, you could use some more hot glue to stick it down. I don't think you need it because the wet glue, like I said, does hold it. It's just it takes a lot longer to dry, which is okay when you're sticking down a photo, but when you want to get straight into the layout, it's a bit harder with the mesh. So there it is, and as you can see, it creates this really cool textured effect that you don't really get with anything else. So there's a little bit of a close-up for you, and it's not too bulky on the side. I did try and stick it down as best as possible. Now here's another way to use some alphas that you don't often use. What I'm using these ones for is I'm going to do the title, obviously, but I didn't really want that dotted print on the top, but I did want the gold foil. So I'm actually grabbing out my black Posca paint pen. You could just paint this with normal paint. It's just using the paint pen works a lot faster, and I'm just colouring in the parts that I didn't want. The great thing about Posca pens is that they're opaque, so they cover it up really well, and they haven't rubbed off of this alpha. This is an alpha from the Reject Store. I just skipped ahead to when I coloured them all in, and I'm just using my little piece of plastic that I used to make sure they're stuck down exactly where I wanted. And that is the title done. I really like how this looked, and I think it's a good way to repurpose alphabets that you are having trouble using. I love the actual font of this alpha. It's just really hard trying to use the actual colour of it. And I'm also going to be using these Jelly Bean Soup, I think they're called Teensy Type, in black, to just spell the word sleepy. I always call him Sleepy Shadow. It's so silly. So I'm just putting that down, and that is going to be my title. In my scrappy process, I like to do my titles first if I'm feeling a little bit uneasy on where the embellishments are going to go. And when I'm doing something different and new, I like to put the title down because it helps me to sort of get my mind with the key elements of my layout. And the key elements for me are my photo and my title. Everyone is different. I'm just using a pen here to do a doodly border. It's just sort of bringing in an extra black element and sort of actually tying it in together. I feel like when you've got half the page that is a pattern paper and then half that is still white, to me it feels like the white's going to float away and the black kind of reins it in. If I had a sewing machine, I probably would actually have done some stitching purely because I think it would look really, really cool with that mesh. You could also stitch the mesh on. There's another way to do it if you didn't want to use hot glue, and I'm just going through this embellishment pack from the reject store to find a few little embellishments. I didn't want anything too big for this layout because of the fact that that mesh is just really in your face, and I did really want that to be the key element, the key embellishment element. Try and say that 3 times fast. I did really want that to be the center of attention, so the embellishments that I do gravitate towards are some little things, some little sprinkles like wood veneer and those little flower sprigs and those leaves. I think it will complement the bold in your face mesh. That's a tip for you if you're using really big embellishments and you're not sure how they're going to work. This is just an Amy Tan roller stamp, and I'm just doing it a few times to get that ghosting effect. Yeah, if you feel like your giant embellishments are really, standing out, add some tiny little ones, some little sprinkles around it. I feel like it tones it down, and that's something that I like to do when things are really in your face. I like to use little sprinkles. If you're curious, the stamp that I'm using, the ink, it's Memento in Tuxedo Black, I believe. I got it from Craft Online. It's pretty good. I'm not entirely sure if it's waterproof, but it's permanent. Nothing ever comes off, so I'm happy with it. I'm just going to also add in a few wooden elements for 2 reasons. One is to give this layer a little bit of warmth because it was starting to feel really dark, and 2, also to kind of draw on that wood background actually that's in the photo. As you can see, there's like a wooden board that he was resting up against, and I just sort of thought that kind of tied that together. I'm sort of keeping my embellishments on the right hand side of the photo purely because I didn't want anything on those paper layers. It's just what I felt like for the layout. These are some tiny word stickers from, I'm not even sure what it is. It's something from Spotlight. They're pretty common. You see them everywhere here in Australia if you go to Spotlight. And I think it just says something like lovely, and I'm just putting a few gold hearts. So the reason I'm doing the gold hearts again is to sort of draw on that gold background piece. I don't like to go away from like my 3 key colors. So the 3 key colors for this layout would be gold, black, and sort of like that bluey color, which as you can see sort of does feature. I've got gold, I've got black, and I've got tiny little spritz of like greeny blue in there with the embellishments, and then as a sort of accent color I'm actually using the wood grain. So I'm adding a few blue stickers down and a few little tiny wood grain hearts, and I think that's this layout more or less done. I hope you enjoyed this video. This layout actually was very, very quick. If you were able to sew that mesh down, I think you could do this layout in 10 minutes. It was so quick. It was just because I was fiddling around with it. That was the only problem. I'm also going to add another roller date stamp down the bottom. That is an October afternoon one. Not sure about the brand. So hope you guys liked the video. If you recreate this layout, let me know over on Instagram, and here's a close-up for you. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Bye!